and then we go live, and then we get into it. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to the stream, in which we got a little bit of a thing to discuss, specifically being the presser ahead of Norwich City. Now, it was one of those pressers where you sort of know the direction that it's going to go from the beginning. There's nothing that is going to be super, groundbreaking, but there's a couple of little important things that we need to sort of discuss in there regardless. So, we're going to discuss them, and it's going to be absolutely wonderful. First off, I need to get to the right bit of my notes, if I will be 1 second. Sorry about this. I should have prepared in advance. But then again, as you can probably tell, and this is why I might not be streaming for too long, I'm a little bit ill at the moment, hence sounding like this. So my deepest of apologies. Hello, Rob, and hello, Sly. But if I'm not able to go for an extended period of time, that's why. And I would prefer to do a longer stream, but I can't. So I'm just going to go through the very, very basics. And the press has sort of started on discussion around the ban. That's not going to happen, Sly. The press has started on discussion of the ban that he picked up when he got sent off against Manchester City, which everyone kind of thinks is a load of bollocks. But the ban has been given anyway and isn't being appealed against. He basically said that he still thinks it's not the right decision to be sent off, but he's not going to appeal it because the general idea is, why would we continue having the conversation about this when we could be having the conversation about football? You could sort of add to more and more sort of toxic fuel on the fire of, should he be banned, should he be not banned? Or we could take his seemingly preferred route of, can we just get it done with? It's an FA Cup match, so it doesn't matter too much. Let's just sort the ban. He did, however, say that one of the most frustrating parts about it was that it would affect what he called his flawless record. Up until this point, he hadn't gotten a red card at any point in his career, which was really, really good. And I think was adding to the fact that we were able to combat the dirty Leeds narrative, and we have been for a little while. Because for the past 3 seasons or so under Daniel Farke, in his first season, we got 2 red cards. I think they weren't even firm reds, if I remember right. There was one for Rodon that was ridiculous and never a red card. But second season, I can't remember getting any red cards on the field. And this season, I can't remember getting any red cards apart from the Daniel Farke one, which is what makes it so frustrating. So for that sort of nice and clean and happy record to be broken up by what is generally a little bit of a poor decision is a shame, but it's where we are. And I think Farke also sees that as a shame. That's why he didn't just let it drop. But I can kind of respect him not letting that drop. That's kind of a good thing. Then he was asked how much do the club feel that there's a chance to make history, but he kind of said, if you've got a chance to go further, you've got to take it. But then again, you don't want to be in a position where you are risking players, so it feels like it's going to be a heavy rotation kind of vibe. We got into that a little bit further later on. And then he was asked a little bit of something about the club's form. And he was asked, will a positive result help the sort of general feelings of confidence amidst a couple of losses, specifically pointing towards Sunderland and Manchester City? Now, the Man City one, we probably assume that we're going to lose before the match even happens. That is just rule of thumb. I think we performed better than we were expected to. That was quite nice. The Sunderland one was sort of interesting. And he said, on a sort of following question around how do you stay level-headed in a situation like this when a lot of people are getting a little bit worried, he said that he doesn't panic at all because why be nervous? He felt like we were a bit unfortunate, and specifically he phrased it, if you play the same game 20 times, 16 times we win. He did mention the penalty that we weren't given. He mentioned that we didn't quite have enough in the final third. There was a bit of sort of, if I got one for celebrating, that was, I think, a second yellow rather than a red, which is, again, a bit of a weird one. But either way, on the pitch, we've not had any red cards, which is the important bit. But he mentioned that we weren't given the penalty. He mentioned that in the final third, we weren't really doing things right, but he also just sort of brought up that if we're clicking a little bit more, we win that 90% of the time. Well, specifically 80% of the time. But they only win it 5% of the time, because he also mentioned that they probably win 1 in 20, which was the one that we got. He also then said that he trusts his players, and the only things that matter are results. He thinks that we'll need 7 to 9 points, which feels a little bit on the high side to me. But, there's a reason that I'm not a Premier League manager. And it's because I'm not particularly good at that. So there we go. But there is the general feeling around it of this result isn't going to be what turns everything around. We don't really have a reason to be scared right now, which, I mean, I kind of get. But then again, we are fairly close to the relegation zone. I don't think we're the ones in the most trouble. I think that is Spurs at the moment. But there is that sort of general hovering sentiment. And also the idea that the FA Cup, he specifically said, is very special, but survival in the Premier League is a priority. So we can expect a lot of rotation in this one. Was a little bit of a question around Spurs and saying, are you surprised that Spurs are where they are? He said, looking at the squad, yes, but at the same time, if we want to survive, we need to be ahead of teams of that sort of calibre with a lot of very, very good players. Sly with the question of who will be managing, it will be Edmund Riemer, who is his assistant manager. Is my belief that, or is it Chris Domagala, who's one of his other assistants? It'll be a symphony of assistants, is my guess, which, I mean, that makes sense, to be honest. They always work with the squad anyway. It's going to be the same kind of system. And Farke will be effectively managing from up in the press box anyway, so it's not going to have too much of an impact. Then he was asked a little bit about whether the fixture holds it like special emotion towards him, especially as the former Norwich boss. And he said yes, because Norwich holds a bit of a special place for him. It was the first place that gave him an actual opportunity in the UK. But his focus has to be the team that he has right now. We are not bringing Jesse back, Sly. No. Bad idea. He says that it's a shame that he can't be there on the touchline, but he trusts his assistants whilst being impressed with the way that Norwich have sort of turned things around recently. It's been a fairly significant improvement from them. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how they approach this one, because they are pushing for the playoffs, but they're not going to want to rest players because they've got that little bit of momentum. So it's going to be fun to see what we can do in terms of overcoming them. When it comes to the squad, and it took a damn long time to ask a question about the squad, specifically mentioned Okafor and said that he's not in team training yet. He's still out, which to me is a little bit of a worry because I thought he was going to be a little bit close to returning, but that's not the case. It does imply, however, that he's going to be training on his own, which is completely fine and good and wonderful and dandy, and I like it. But everyone else is in, everyone else is available, which include Facundo Buonanotte, who he was specifically asked about. Along the lines of, Buonanotte's been struggling, do you think he's going to have a little bit of an impact in this match? I think it was Graham Smith that asked this one. And he said that hard work is always the answer, was the way that he opened this. And to me, that felt like a little bit of a, I'm going to call you out in a press conference, but I'm going to do it in the most gentle way I possibly can. Because to say hard work is always the answer is the most generic thing that you can say. It's a nice, safe thing that goes, I mean, this is just true for all players always. So that's a quite nice thing to do, but also pull it together because you're not really doing particularly well for Kundo. He speaks very well about his character. He says that he's a good sort of presence to have. He's enjoying his time here and people are enjoying having him around. But there's also the sort of feeling of his actual level isn't there at the moment, because there's also a mention of he's getting all the help that we can offer him, which is sort of saying that, and I don't know whether this was like a lost in translation thing, because again, we got to remember he's speaking in his second language, but there is a little bit of this guy kind of needs a little bit of help, in my opinion, to that statement, which is sort of interesting because there is a little bit of a feeling that Buonanotte really needs to start picking things up a little bit. And if Buonanotte doesn't start picking things up a little bit, then you've got to start having big questions around what his role is actually going to be, not only in this squad now, but for the foreseeable future, whether that's at Brighton, whether that's somewhere else. When it comes to people looking at him and going, yeah, but Brighton see him as like a decent prospect for the future, I think everyone... Thank you. Thank you, Zach. I think everyone sort of assumed that, oh, he's a really good prospect for the future for Brighton, therefore he's a decent prospect for now for Leeds. And we kind of forget that we are now roughly at Brighton's level. So it complexifies things, which isn't a word, but complicates. That's the one. A little bit of the brain fog. There we go. We found the word. That doesn't matter. But the general feeling is that he'll be playing in the match on Sunday. Don't know particularly what his role will be. Because because this comes down to where Piru plays. Because, as James has mentioned in the comments, Piru is very, very probably going to be playing on this because he's been in various bits of social content and all that kind of stuff, plus FA Cup match. If you're not playing Piru, then Piru is never playing a game ever again. So is it a case of Buonanotte plays behind Piru? Is it a case of Buonanotte plays on the right, Piru in the middle? It's a bit of a weird one. And the way that we sort of approach this is a little bit of a question mark on what that means for Piru and what that means for Buonanotte. I hope that they both put in a reasonably good performance this weekend, just because I don't have any bad feelings towards them as people. But as footballers at the moment, I don't quite think they're where we need them. In addition to that, there was a very, very quick question on rotation and how does it affect the rhythm of the way that we play. He said it's ideal to not rotate too much, but then again, it is professional football. If you pick a player and they've not played for a while, they've still been training all that time. They are still a good footballer. Therefore, you would expect some form of performance out of them, which I think is a completely fair thing to say. Then went on to say that players need to wait for their chances because obviously if you've got players in the first team that are performing to a very, very decent standard, you're not going to say, well, you get out because we just need to give Bornau some minutes. That would be absolutely bonkers, and I'm glad that we're not doing that. But when players get those chances after waiting for them, they very much need to grab at them because it is a competitive. There we go. It is a bit of a competitive environment. And it's an environment in which you're going to need to do things that earn a spot within the 11 rather than I can just sort of coast and I'll walk my way in, which is not the way that any of this works. Specifically, he did mention that players can use this as an opportunity to break into the team, so it felt like a little bit of a sort of call to arms for Buonanotte or Bornau or Tanaka or Piru or Nonto or James of if you pull it together, there is a way into the starting 11 here because you are decent footballers. I have signed you because you are good at football. Prove it to me, which I'm kind of glad to see. Then from this point onwards, the press conference was a little bit flat, a little bit bland. The fun questions sort of came to an end there, in which there was a question on Elland Road's atmosphere versus Norwich in the playoffs, where it was someone asked, is that the first time that you've seen Elland Road have that kind of atmosphere? And the first thing that came to mind in my head was we literally beat Leicester 3-1 coming back from 1-0 down that very same season. And that was possibly the best atmosphere I've ever seen Elland Road have. So, no, that wasn't the first time he saw Elland Road bouncing. But it was sort of responded to with the whole supporters are second to none, all that kind of spiel that you sort of expect out of any football manager, because you kind of have to say that. Because if you don't, then you end up in a little bit of a position of, well, so you're calling out the fans when there's nothing to call out, which wouldn't make any sense in the slightest, in my opinion. He also said that he isn't quite sure whether being a cup match at this stage in the competition is going to be quite as bouncing at Elland Road. And that's fair, that's understandable. But I think it's going to be a reasonably good atmosphere because we got a chance to get into the quarterfinals for the first time in 20-odd years, I think. And then after that, we are a single game away from Wembley, which annoyingly I don't think I'll be able to get to this time. But that's fine, you know, it's going to happen. Then finally, there was one more question on his run in the FA Cup when he was at Norwich during the COVID season. And my general feeling on that was, why are you asking this question? This is a very, very weird question to ask the manager of Leeds United when this happened like 5 years ago. And someone sort of asked, if you win this, is it going to be sort of an addition to your CV? Does it add to the way that people will perceive you as a manager to get to this point in the FA Cup? And I think he had a pretty valid point of no one particularly cares how far you get in the FA Cup unless you win it. And I get that, like, completely. It's a matter of, well, cool, you can make a little bit of progress in the Cup. That's fine and dandy. But if you make progress in the Cup and you don't win it, then what's the point? No one looks at a manager's CV and goes, they were FA Cup semi-finalists in 2008. Like, no one cares. Like, I can't remember who... Was it Javi Gracia, actually? That was Watford's manager when they made it to the FA Cup final and they got absolutely battered. but no one remembers who the manager was because that doesn't matter because they didn't win it. Like, if they won it, everyone would be like, brilliant, incredible managerial performance, but they didn't. So, quite hard to care. I'm going to go through a couple of little questions in the chat before I bring the stream to a close. One that interests me a little bit is Sly's, where he's asked, do you think Norwich will set up in a classic Championship low block? This is quite interesting, right? Because I think Norwich aren't necessarily playing like that recently, and I will cover it in a little bit more detail when I do my preview for the weekend, because I actively work with someone that is a Norwich fan. But I'm going to do a little bit more of a sort of breakdown of all of that. But when it comes to the way that Norwich have been playing recently, they have been a little bit more open, they've been a little bit more expansive, they've been trying to play interesting stuff, which for me makes them, I'm not going to say a little bit more of a threat, but it means that they're actually going to try and play against us, which, to be honest, is kind of a good thing for us, because it means that we can sort of swing into it with that sort of verve and the moxie and the love of actually attacking our opponents that we had in the Championship. So a team will come at us and we are happy to hit them on the counter, and that will happen again and again and again and again and again. I think ultimately we'll land in the right place. Tanaka will start, it'll be Rusty and Farke will use that as an excuse to not play him. I think that's a fairly harsh way of looking at it, because people... How do I put this? People have fairly consistently asked, why isn't Tanaka playing more? If you're one of the people that is asking that of Daniel Farke, it then stands to reason that you can't say, well, how dare he play him? Of course he's not going to play particularly well. Like, yeah, but you asked for Tanaka to get minutes, and recently Gruev has been very, very good. Ampadu is a key part of our team. Like, we visibly look worse when he's not on the pitch, and statistically we are worse when he's not on the pitch. And Stark has been absolutely incredible. So, if you're in a position of, yeah, but we need to get Tanaka in, when would you have personally played him? Because I think the FA Cup is the perfect way to sort of introduce someone and say, look, you come on in, we'll see how you start performing, and then if you perform well, then you stick around. But if you don't perform well, then it absolutely makes sense that obviously you're not going to start against Palace. You're not going to start against whoever we play after Palace, because I've completely forgotten. Instead, you're going to be in a spot of, okay, maybe a few sub appearances, but I can understand why he's not starting games. It may make them honestly a little bit more vulnerable. I think it will. I think they'll try and actually play football against us, because that's what they tend to do at the moment. Hoping they don't go with Sunderland blueprint. I hope not as well, and I feel like they won't, because they've got a manager that has a little bit of pride in the way that he plays. And if that doesn't work out, then that doesn't work out. But we'll see how it goes. If we do get to Wembley, we'll start Get Joby to Wembley in the chat. Oh, thank you. I don't think it could be much more clear why Gruev has been preferred to Tanaka. It's defensive solidity, however you may feel about that, but it's the case. Tanaka falls asleep defensively. He does. And at the same time, Gruev has been contributing a little bit going forward too. Like, 3 assists this season. That ain't half bad. He's got as many assists as Anton Stack in, let's have a look, 700 fewer minutes. So you can look at Gruev and you can say, well, he doesn't do the playmaking stuff in the way that I would like him to do the playmaking stuff. But is that so much of an issue when he appears more defensive, but he does still do the other side of the game? It's just in a bit of a glitch way of he sort of blends into the background. Is Farke transitioning back to his predictable ways? I don't think so. I think it's a case of balancing things and thinking we don't want to concede goals necessarily, and we were quite unlucky to concede against Sunderland, to be fair. Like, Ampadu had a moment of switching off, moved his arm towards the ball, handball. But then again, I think we should have scored from a penalty. So that's where things become a little bit questionable. I don't think it's a transition back to any form of predictability or anything. I think it's just the way that any manager works. You can look at any manager in the league and you can say, oh, well, Pep Guardiola's probably going to play 4 at the back this week. Yeah, because managers have systems that they stick to. Not every manager is going to go, well, I'll dance around the place and pick something depending on who we're playing against. It's normal. It's the standard, and that's fine sometimes. Unfortunately, we got shit out successfully by Sunderland, which happens. It does. And it's disappointing, but you sort of have to deal with that sometimes. Anyway, I am going to end the stream there because my nose is actively feeling more and more bunged up. And I would love to stick around more, and I might do a stream tomorrow depending on how I'm feeling. I've got work at a horrible time this morning, though. I'd say this morning, I mean sort of tomorrow morning. It's like 3 a.m. I start or something. So I will see if I am able to, but we'll find out. But I'm going to bring the stream to a close there. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, pop a like on it. That is always massively appreciated. Subscribe if you're not yet. Become a channel member. All that fun stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. And I will see all of you guys later. Doodaloo. Where's my ending screen? I always lose the end screen. There we go.